In the mid-19th century, the first president of the University of Michigan made a key decision that became a defining moment in the university's history. Set atop an historic hill in Ann Arbor, Michigan, sits the Detroit Observatory, a living artifact where modern-day astronomers can still trace the stars, and from where the University of Michigan can trace its research roots. This dome opened to the heavens for the first time in 1854. The significance of that event wouldn't be evident until much later in the University of Michigan's history. Over 150 years later, this building still stands as a historical treasure for both stargazers and historians to appreciate and utilize. So Karen, we're here at the Detroit Observatory. Now this building has a real historical feel to it when you walk through the floors creak. How much of this is original construction?
This is the original observatory. It was restored in the late 1990s. There had been additions over the years, but then they were subtracted, and so we're back to the original 1854 building. It's one of the only places on campus that's still a 19th century space as it was intended.
I'm curious how all this got started.
Well, it was the brainchild of the first president of the university, Henry Phillips Tappan. He came here in 1852 with the intention of turning the University of Michigan from a sort of provincial liberal arts college into a research university following the Prussian model. And in the 1850s, any good research university had to have an observatory.
President Tappan knew that major funding would be necessary to execute his vision. Tappan's dream became a reality in just 2 short years through the contributions of Henry Walker, a former state of Michigan Attorney General, and many generous donors from Detroit.
By February of 1853, he could light out for Europe to go choose the instruments to go in the building. The first telescope was the Meridian circle telescope, which is in our east wing. Big Prussian telescope, totally state-of-the-art. It's a masterpiece of its type.
Henry Fitz, a renowned lens maker from New York, was commissioned for the observatory's second telescope, the third largest in the world.
So the big telescope in the dome is an American telescope. First floor German, second floor American.
University of Michigan astronomer and researcher Patrick Seitzer regularly travels to telescopes around the world.
And these doors are normally kept closed to keep hot air from the building rising up into the dome. But here's our 12-inch Henry Fitz refractor from the 1850s. The tube is from the early part of this century when they replaced the wooden tube, but everything else is still original, and it still works.
So do you get a sense of nostalgia when you get to spend time with this telescope or older telescopes? Because you also spend time with a lot of really new cutting-edge technology.
It's great. It's fantastic that the university has put the resources to bring this facility back to life. When I'm doing professional astronomy, we're sitting at a keyboard staring at a computer monitor. And if we want to use the Hubble Space Telescope, it's totally remote control. But coming back here takes you back to your roots. Very nice to have the hands-on hardware again. So if you wanted to focus this, you would turn this wheel here until you got the star.
President Tappan had to get researchers here to the university.
Tappan was having a hard time recruiting people to leave established institutions on the East Coast and come out to where? Michigan? So Tappan remembered a young man named Franz Brunet, a German astronomer who was recognized, celebrated early in his career, and Franz Brunet accepted. And so the first member of the faculty with a PhD was a German. He came over with the Meridian circle telescope.
University historian Rudy Lindner notes the turning point for research at the University of Michigan had finally begun, and students took notice.
Students could walk over from the central campus, they could take courses in this building, they could use that telescope, and not simply say, now we're going to look at Jupiter, now we're going to look at Saturn, now we're going to look at the women's dorm halfway down the block. What we're going to do is you're going to have the chance to make your mark. The research was right here, it was visible, it was on the hill, people lived nearby. The researchers themselves were doing the daily teaching, so the contacts between the work of research and the work, for instance, of undergraduate education was immediately there.
It's also a living artifact, and
It
that
is.
people can still come.
We were fortunate in that the Bentley Historical Library, which maintains the archives of the university, was willing to take this on as the only three-dimensional archive of university history in their collection. I also tell them this is the only archive they leave out in the rain.
What about the telescopes? Is the public able to do some stargazing?
So we are having our first viewing nights again. We had one the other night. It was wonderful. We saw Mars, we saw the rings of Saturn, we saw Orion's nebula. You could see the little clouds forming around these young stars. It was just fabulous.
So from this vantage point in history, how important was Tappan to the development of an astronomy program at the University of Michigan?
But the reason we're standing here, the reason I'm employed by the University of Michigan, the reason that there are those two glorious telescopes on a mountain peak in Chile are all, in the end, directed back to Tappan.